There we go. So welcome. My name is Mallory. I'm going to start also sharing my screen so you can see my presentation. Let's hope this works okay. All right. It's covering my present button. Okay. Can everyone see this okay? Just like a quick yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure before I get started. Awesome. So welcome to my presentation to the Lerner Learning Series. My presentation will be on tiny habits and other behavior change tactics. My name is Mallory McPherson-Wehan, and on the next slide, I'll go a little bit more into who I am. There we go. So that's me. I completed my master's degree in public health in May of 2020. I concentrated in maternal and child health. I really looked primarily at health communication and behavior change as the core of my master's, and I loved it. So I'm really, really into health behavior change, and especially in the areas of sexual and reproductive health. I'm also a certified health coach and personal trainer, so I have my own private business where I take clients on for health coaching and personal training, and I'm also a group fitness instructor. I teach a variety of different group fitness classes. And then I also, my full-time job is I'm the senior fitness and wellness coordinator for GW. So I oversee GW's fitness related health promotion. So anything from personal training to group fitness to massage, nutrition, all of those different departments and programming fall under me. And then I just also put my website here. So on my website, I have my private health coaching and personal training, but I also post blogs, and there's some other fun information on there. And then I also put my Instagram, which is my fitness mal, like the fitness at my fitness pal, but with an M, because my name is Mallory. So if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, you can follow me on Instagram, or my email is just mallorycmw@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat at the end. So we're going to start off here. Before everyone got here, just a thing in general, feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. That's totally fine. I love questions. I'll also have time at the end for questions. And I think it would be really helpful for this presentation for everyone to have some sort of habit or behavior that they're looking to adopt. I definitely look at behavior change from a health lens. So I think it would be helpful if the behavior had to do with health. I would argue that a lot of behaviors have to do with health that people don't even think about. But that'll be helpful for the presentation as we kind of look at models and theories and talk about them. But I'm going to start off with kind of what seems to be an obvious question: what is behavior change? And behavior change is a deceptively simple concept. People are just like, well, it's changing your behavior. And that's true, but it is very hard to change your behavior. It's very hard to adopt habits. It's not an easy thing. So this has become a rather thriving field in a bunch of different areas of research. Because if you think about it, to change a behavior takes a variety of different things, and we'll talk about those more later. But there's a variety of reasons you would change a behavior or want to change a behavior to improve your health or your mental health, whatever. And there's a variety of things that are kind of holding you back from those behavior changes. So we'll talk about all of those today. So as I said, it's really helpful to pick a behavior or habit you're trying to adopt, and then we can kind of apply those. So today we're going to be going through 4 different models or theories of behavior change, specifically health behavior change. And I want you all to try to apply each of those to that behavior. And I think it'll be really helpful by the end to see which theories really resonate with you and which ones maybe don't feel like they resonate. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. And then at the end, we'll talk about some tools that you can take into your everyday life to work on building and sustaining positive habits and behaviors. So the first model is the biopsychosocial model. And it's a big word, but if you really just break it down, biological, psychological, and social, I guess just social. And so this theory was actually really the first of its kind because it looked at health from a holistic lens. Before this model came out, people really viewed health as the absence of illness. So you were healthy if you weren't ill. And this really looked at it from a multifactorial perspective. So, for example, with biological, looking at genetics, age, sex as factors that lead to your health, or psychological, your mental health, different behaviors that affect your psychological health as ending up affecting your health. And then social, so your relationships, what you surround yourself with, affecting your health. So this model was very revolutionary at the time. I think a really good example of this would be hypertension, so high blood pressure. So thinking about the biological factors that could lead to hypertension, thinking about the psychological factors like stress that can lead to hypertension, and then thinking about the social factors that may affect your behaviors that then could lead to hypertension. That when I was studying for my health coach exam, it really helped to have tangible examples to apply things to. Recently being like in the last 4 or 5 decades, they've added ecological to this. And I didn't add it on here because it's not technically Engel's theory, but ecological is looking at the environmental perspective, so your built environment. And I wrote down a couple examples of that so that you can think about applying it. So relationships with your family, that's your built environment. Thinking about rules, regulations, and policies. So some examples of that could be public parks in your area, or sidewalks, or where's the transportation. Thinking about community design, that kind of goes back to sidewalks and how your communities look. So food access is a great example of that. Your belief systems is a really great example of ecological as well as social. And then social and cultural norms, really big here too. And that can affect different health behaviors that you would adopt. And then economic structures too is a big element of that. So thinking about how all 4 of those different aspects affect your health. And if you want to kind of think back to that behavior you chose, or the habit, and thinking about all the different factors that affect it. So I'll kind of talk out the example that I gave in my head. And then if anyone wants to share how they think that these would affect their behavior, we can do that in 1 second. So for the sake of this presentation, my health behavior or habit is going to be getting 8 hours of sleep every night. So if we think about that from the biopsychosocial ecological model, so biologically, I guess we can say some people are biologically destined to sleep more than others. We'll go with that. But also age can affect how much sleep you get. Psychological, maybe my stress levels are affecting my sleep, or my mental health is affecting my sleep. And then social, I mean, I guess sleeping with a partner that moves around a lot or sweats in bed can affect your sleep. I don't know. Or sleeping in the same room as a sibling that snores, different social aspects. And then ecological could be in an area where there's a lot of construction, or an area that has a lot of traffic that could keep you up at night. So if anyone wants to share their behavior or habit in different aspects that affect it, I'll give a second for people to think about it. And then if you would like to share, feel free. And if not, we'll move on to the next one. So I'll give everyone a couple seconds. If any of these jump out to you, feel free to share. If not, totally fine.
So mine was like studying every day after each class. So I guess psychological, I don't know, if my mental health is great that day, that would really help if I feel more comfortable and confident in myself.
Yeah.
Social, that can also pose as like distractions, like friends and stuff like that. Ecological, so that includes like your immediate environment, like your family. Well, like my house is right next to the road, so sometimes it gets really loud. That can affect it. And then biological, I guess maybe for me, I like sometimes my attention span can kind of fluctuate, so I might not be able to concentrate for long periods of time, but then other times I can. So those are my ideas.
That was a great example. I think one thing you touched on there too is a lot of these overlap. So
Yeah.
everything like social and ecological have a ton of overlap. So if you're thinking about being around your family, like that is both your ecological, your built environment, as well as social. And if it's
Right.
really bothering you and it puts you in a bad mood, that could be psychological. So,
Yeah.
they all kind of add on each other. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Thank you for sharing. That was a perfect example. All right, moving on to our next one. So this is the Tronstheoretical Model. This is one of my favorites from my health coaching exam. So transtheoretical, another big word, but really just looking at different kinds of theory inside of this model. What I really like about this model that differs a little bit from the biopsychosocial model is it takes in readiness to change, which I think is a really crucial part of behavior change, is deciding whether or not you're actually ready to make that change. So if we want to, I also really like that this model looks at behavior change as a dynamic process. So it's not just linear. You're not going to build a habit and then just keep doing it. You will with some behaviors, but most it's going to be pretty dynamic. You're going to be jumping around on this model. So I really like that aspect of it. So thinking again back to my example of the 8 hours of sleep a night, if we start with pre-contemplation, which is the beginning, or the beginning, it's a circle, but the first one. So pre-contemplation is basically you're not even thinking about doing the behavior, or if you are, you just put no value on it. It's of very little importance to you to change this behavior. So if we're thinking about my example of 8 hours of sleep, I have no desire to get 8 hours of sleep. I don't view it as important, or maybe I'm not even thinking about that as something that I value at all. Thinking about contemplation. So that's weighing the pros and cons. So maybe I'm at the stage where I think, 8 hours of sleep might be really good. Maybe it'll make me feel more alert or awake. But that's going to be really hard for me. I love staying up late. That might be a big barrier. So you're really weighing those pros and cons. You haven't really made a decision on whether or not you want to adopt that behavior. Preparation, so preparing to change. So you're thinking about changing. Maybe you've decided that you do want to make that change. You're trying to navigate how to do it. So 8 hours of sleep, maybe I'm creating bedtime routines to really help me get in bed on time, or I'm setting an alarm to remind myself to get into bed. Action, so that's when you're starting to adopt the behavior, and it's not always regular. This stage is definitely the most prone to like fallbacks, being that you may fall back into preparation and need to kind of restart or re-trigger that behavior. But you're taking steps in the direction, like action steps to move towards that behavior. And then, so in the example of 8 hours, you would start to do it maybe a couple times a week. And then maintenance is that you've basically turned that behavior or habit into something that you're doing every day, or whatever the time restraint is that you put on that. So they usually consider that more than 6 months of doing a behavior, you're considered in maintenance. So you're incorporating it into your everyday life. And if you can think about some behaviors that you adopted before, or that have kind of fallen out, you can probably notice that you don't just go in that linear, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action. And maybe you do on some, but sometimes you're jumping around. Maybe you switch jobs, and that brings you from maintenance back to contemplation with a behavior. Or I don't know, something comes up, a loved one dies, and that really changes your environment. So you need to reevaluate some of your habits. So this is really a dynamic process rather than just moving around this circle constantly. I also will say if you think about behaviors in your life or habits that you've adopted, I think the biggest part of this is a readiness to change. So even though you may have the ability to adopt a habit, you may not really actually want to do it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with the other theories, but I think that readiness to change is really crucial to actually moving forward on the trans-theoretical model. So I'll give you all another opportunity here if you feel like sharing. So think about the example that you came up with, the behavior or habit that you're looking to adopt, and think about where you are on this, which stage you're at, and where you kind of want to go with it. So I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to think about it. And then if you would like to share, feel free. Floor is open.
Okay, so I'm going to try to give this a go.
Yeah.
So my behavior change is to leave work on time.
Love it.
And what's that?
I love that. Yeah.
So, and that's because I want to move more and exercise more. And so so my habit now is to just work until I'm finished and there's not enough time or energy left to do anything else. And so I've thought about this a lot. So I guess I've been contemplative, but for probably too long. And I'm trying to like I've set timers. I've put my yoga mat on the floor and leave it there, so if I have to trip over it and I can't, like I see it all the time. And I still haven't been able to, even on the most beautiful days, I don't know why I choose work over like taking a walk outside.
It really sounds like you're in preparation. I mean, putting the yoga mat there is the perfect example of preparation, but you just sounds like you haven't moved on to action yet.
Right. I've moved on to action, but just not regularly. Like, It's not like I can't, even though I think I would love to do this, I don't. And that just sort of really boggles my mind that I would choose work over these other things that are way more fun.
Yeah.
But I also feel like a real, you want to do a good job. So it's a struggle. So what's the next step?
I mean, you brought up two really great points. First, I would say, behavior change is really hard. I hope that at the end of this presentation, you don't come away with it like, wow, this is going to be so easy. I got it down. I think it's a lifelong thing to work on behavior change, but I think there will be some tools later on that will help you get to that next step. My second kind of piece of advice there would be to really look at that readiness to change. So if you really do feel like you're ready to make this change, see, does this decision to work less align with my values? If so, like, where can I think the tiny habits one that we're going to get to is going to be really helpful for you, but where can I start to integrate some of this smaller into my day-to-day life so that it's not as big of an overwhelming task? So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more later, but those are two thoughts. Anyone else? For those of you who joined also, I advise everyone to kind of think of a behavior or habit that they're looking to change or improve on. And so we're applying those to these different models, and then we'll do some more discussion at the end too. So just start to think that over. All right, any last questions on the trans-theoretical model before we move on, or anyone want to apply their habit here? Okay, cool. We'll move on. So we are on to the health belief model. Let me just make sure so this one brings in kind of a new component, which actually I think, Susan, this will be helpful for you too. So obviously our emotions and our perceptions of a behavior play a huge role in whether or not we choose to adopt it. So the health belief model, it was much more focused on chronic disease, especially in my public health degree. We really looked at things like heart disease and cancer, but I think that this really can be applied to day-to-day life and activities. So I'm actually going to use COVID and wearing a mask as my example here, because I think that will help everyone kind of understand this concept. So it's basically saying that your decision to change is based on 4 main factors. The first is perceived susceptibility. So that is, how likely am I to get the disease or the illness? So if we're talking about COVID, how likely am I to get it? That's going to play a huge role in whether or not I choose to adopt this behavior. Perceived seriousness. So how bad will it be? If we're thinking about heart disease, well, I guess all heart disease is kind of bad. That was a bad example, but thinking about the severity of the illness for you. They use severity a lot with, this was primarily used for cigarette cessation before. So, how bad will it actually be if I keep smoking cigarettes was a good example. Benefits. So what will the benefits of this be? How will it help me? How effective is this behavior? And then barriers is, how difficult will this behavior be? How will it impact my everyday life? So I think that all 4 of those are really good ways to kind of look at the emotions and perceptions you have around that behavior. Do you think that it's an effective behavior? If you don't, then you're probably not going to be very incentivized to perform the behavior. And if you believe that the barriers really outweigh the benefits, then it's unlikely that you will end up doing it. So I'm going to let everyone take a second and think about that behavior or habit, and kind of think about how they would adopt it. So with the mask example, I think that's a really easy example here of, thinking about the benefits of it. Okay, I'm helping people not get COVID. I'm protecting myself. Like, those are some of the benefits, but barriers, maybe it makes your face hot. I don't know. Maybe it isn't stylish, but hopefully the benefits outweigh the barriers on that one. But you can kind of think about that with different health behaviors or habits. So I'll let everyone think that out. And if you would like to share yours, feel free. The floor is open. There's no right answer either. You can always just talk it out and I can help you too if you want to try.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you believe in all these 4 things, there has to be something more to it, because then you might still not do it.
Oh yeah, you are so right. Okay, so that's honestly the most gold question ever, because the reality is that theory is theory, models are models, and we human beings are not linear. We're messy. We don't always fall into this. So you've actually stolen one of my discussion questions later of, what are these models missing? What are the theories missing? And I think that's a really great point, because you can believe that, you're likely to get something. You can believe it's severe. You can believe the benefits outweigh the barriers, and you still don't adopt it. And I would say that honestly, the 3 theories that we've talked about so far, you can kind of combine those all together. So maybe you believe that all of these are the case, but it's a built environment issue. Maybe you don't have the social support to do. There's a bunch of different factors that really can play into it. And so I think thinking about which of those is most resonant in your life, is important here, but we'll go through some tools later. But I think it's interesting to look at that and think, well, those are all the case, and yet I'm still not going to adopt the behavior. I don't feel like I will. So that was a great point. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to my personal favorite. All right, we are on tiny habits. Let me just turn my page. So Tiny Habits was created by my favorite social scientist, BJ Fogg. And I wonder if you all resonate with this more because it's also the most recent behavior change theory. So it definitely has more common, I guess, 21st century elements to it. So the concept of, one second. So the concept of tiny habits is, BJ Fogg calls it the ABCs. So the A, as you can see below, is an anchor moment. And I think this will actually be really good for everyone. So an anchor moment is essentially saying that behaviors don't happen in isolation. You need another behavior or routine to happen, and you can tie that new behavior or habit to it. So they call that the anchor moment because it's much easier to associate an existing behavior with a new behavior and tie them together. So an example of that, if my behavior was, I want to start flossing my teeth every night. An anchor moment could be brushing my teeth. Every time I brush my teeth, I will then floss my teeth afterwards. And I brush my teeth every night. So that's going to be my trigger, my anchor moment to then add on flossing your teeth. So that's the A. B is tiny behavior. And that's basically saying that you want to distill those behaviors you want to adopt down to the smallest aspect. So this is going to be a silly example, but bear with me. So again, if mine is flossing my teeth, I might say, I'm going to floss my teeth one night a week, or I'm going to floss one tooth every night. And though that sounds really small, it's much easier and less overwhelming to try to adopt the smallest version of a behavior rather than trying to take on this big, overwhelming task, because the reality is you're unlikely to adopt that. And then C is celebration. So BJ Fogg, his example in this is he would say victory every time he did the behavior. He would give himself congratulations. And this can really help you create a positive intrinsic reinforcement with that behavior. So after I brush my teeth, maybe I have a little happy dance that I do every time. And that really gives me the positive motivation to keep doing it. So you want to have positive associations with that behavior. So the things I love about this model is, I think it's much more applicable to our everyday lives because you can really do it with any behavior or habit, and you just need to distill it down. So in this case, simplicity really matters. You want it to be as simple as possible. So if we think about Susan's example of stopping work early and getting to go move. So maybe your anchor moment is 5 p.m. or whenever you end work. You set an alarm, and when that alarm goes off, you just turn off and you go outside. Or maybe your anchor moment is, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good end of work anchor moment. But I think the yoga mat is a good example, but I'm trying to think of something that would happen every day in your life. But maybe you'll know that better than I will. And then another aspect that BJ Fogg talks about a lot is motivation being unreliable. So oftentimes with behavior change and habits, we assume that motivation is going to push us to do it. And the reality, oftentimes we have highs and lows of motivation. You have some days you're super motivated, and other days you have very low motivation. So we can't really rely on motivation to push us to that point. So instead, that's where the simplicity comes in. You want it to be so small that you can do it every day. And then you give yourself that congratulations afterwards, and that'll give you the positive reinforcement to keep doing it. So I'm going to let everyone take a second and think about those behaviors and see if you can come up with an anchor moment and then the smallest version of that behavior, and then some way that you could celebrate it. And I'll give everyone a second, and then if you're willing to share, feel free to share after.
I think for me, like, since mine is studying, I like a really easy anchor moment would be like after classes are over, because I do that every day.
Yeah.
And the celebratory part, I like to dance, so a little dance. Yeah.
I love that. And I think a way to of making it small would be, maybe so there's this theory in grad school that we learned where people can really only fully concentrate for 25 minutes and then they need a break. So I set my alarm for 25 minutes and then I give myself a 5-minute break. And that is a way of really just, maybe you want to study for 2 hours and you don't have to view it like that. You could do it as 25 minutes of studying and then you get a break. And that is much easier for us to mentally digest.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, cool. We'll go on to the next one. Well, the next one being my discussion questions. So quickly, I want us all to talk about, and this goes back to Susan's question, what theory resonated with you the most and why do you think that? And then what do you feel like was missing from these theories and models that you feel like you see in your everyday life, but it was not reflected in these models? So I'll open the floor and I would love to hear some thoughts on what theory resonated with you the most and what you felt like was missing from the models or theories.
I think the last one, the most recent one, resonated the most, or at least felt like it would be easier to apply and follow because of like doing something that you already do and just simply adding onto it. I think that's really helpful. Now, I don't know if this makes sense, but like in all the theories, I kind of feel like it was maybe like cyclic, so it doesn't kind of have that element of like this is life, and it's really hard to like have all of those different parts which are valid, but also there's like that also the element of surprise, or like for me, like it's not, yeah, I want to study every single day, but then there's always something that happens. So just, I guess, working around the things that might happen out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think that two models indirectly mention that. So I would argue that kind of the trans-theoretical model does that in theory by being not linear but dynamic. So, if something comes up, you may move from action back to contemplation on a behavior if you don't think you can adopt it. But I do think that one thing you're pointing out that is really important is that's kind of looking on a big picture scale. So thinking about, over time, how you move in that process, but even daily, we move back and forth on different behaviors and habits, or even weekly. So it doesn't even have to be on a big scale. It can even be small things come up that affect whether or not we continue to perform that behavior. So that was a great point. Anyone else?
Do you advocate creating logs or things like that to like track progress? Is that at all motivational?
I mean, that's going to be as much a you question as it is a me question. I mean, it really depends on the person. There's not research to necessarily support that, it benefits behavior change over time. But I think for some people that is really encouraging. I think that sometimes it can add a little bit of, how do you put this, like compulsiveness into it. So if you log it, you may feel like you have to do it, and to some degree you want to be gentle and graceful with yourself, and you don't want to force yourself to do things that you don't want to do. You want to push yourself to perform behaviors you know will be good for you, but you need to listen to your body and what it says. So I think logs can sometimes be linear in that and not as dynamic, but I think it's see what works for you. If that really motivates you to perform a behavior, I think that can definitely help. Other thoughts? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so here are some of my tools that I kind of want everyone to reflect on. So throughout these models, three concepts popped up over and over again, and I didn't name them in this way necessarily, but I think you'll see them now. The first is self-efficacy, and that's really the belief that you have the skills and so thinking about flossing my teeth. Do I have floss? I can't do the behavior if I don't have floss. Do I have the skills? Do I know how to floss? I was never really taught, so therefore I'm not probably going to do it because I don't know how. So thinking about those behaviors or habits you want to adopt, do you believe that you can do them? Do you believe you have the skills and ability to make that change? So that's kind of step one. We're actually going to skip down to readiness to change and then go on to social support. So, readiness to change is thinking about those emotions and perceptions around a behavior. So, do you want to make this change? Does it feel important to you? This is again going back to your values and your life. Is this habit or behavior going to fit into your life? Are you ready, really genuinely ready to make that change? And then finally, social support. And I actually think that this is the most important aspect is do you have friends, family, and colleagues who are willing and ready to support you with this change? And that can be on a very small scale and that maybe they're an accountability partner and they remind you to perform a behavior. Or maybe there's someone who physically does it with you and you also try to get them to do and adopt this behavior. So that is used a ton in different behavior change strategies to see if you can have other people also start to adopt that behavior with you, and that really raises the level of motivation. So I think those three aspects are very key when you're thinking about a behavior you want to adopt. And before you even really move on to adopting it, you want to see where your perceptions and emotions are around it, and then see how you can kind of navigate that in your own head. Maybe it's changing that behavior a little bit so that you enjoy it more. Or maybe you really need to develop, maybe I need to go buy floss. Maybe I need to learn how to floss before I really move forward in that behavior. So these three aspects are very key to adopting any behavior and then sustainably continuing to do it and viewing it as a positive in your life rather than kind of taking away something. All right, so we kind of did this already for each of them, but I'll give another platform if people want to do this again. So picking that habit you want to adopt in one of the four theories, maybe in the last slide, you want to think about self-efficacy, social support, and readiness to change, and think about how you could adopt those three tools into the behavior you chose, and then take a minute to think about evaluating your readiness to change. Oh, I already wrote it down here. Social support and self-efficacy. And then if you want to share how any of those tie into your habit or behavior, we can talk about that. One thing that I thought of for the studying is there's this app. I don't have it in my references, but if you're interested in it, it's called like Growing Trees or something. And it's an app where you can pair it with another friend anywhere around the world or the country. And basically, it shuts down your whole phone for the amount of time that you set. So, if I say I want to study for that 25 minutes, it basically just blocks you from using your phone for whatever you set it to be for 25 minutes. And there's a tree growing, and your friend also has the same screen on their phone. So it's like kind of social support as well as kind of the self-efficacy all in one. So that's an example of you can kind of build these different aspects into your behaviors or habits to make different pieces of it fit together. So if anyone has any examples or questions for this part, feel free to ask them. Yeah, I can give you the name of it. I'll find it on my phone afterwards. Yeah. I think another example too with the activity would be, even if you're not physically going to work out or exercise or move with another person, maybe you have a friend that at 5 p.m. every day you say, all right, I logged off, I'm going to go do this thing. And that's a way of holding yourself and then also your friends accountable to do it. My friend Meredith and I do this with yoga. Is every day I tell her the 3 takeaways I had from the yoga class I did. And that really helps me. Well, one, motivates me to do it because I know I'm going to send her my takeaways, but it also helps me evaluate how much I enjoyed it, whether I want to do it the next day. It's really like a good evaluation of my joyful movement as well. So I think those are some examples, but would love if anyone has thoughts on these. If not, I'll move on. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Susan.
That sounds like an interesting idea that you had, but it almost sounds like a log, which you said was not particularly useful.
I don't want that to be your takeaway of what I said necessarily. I think it's like, if it works for you, it works for you. I think I've had clients in the past who became very compulsive with their logs, where like that was the end all. It didn't matter if they wanted to exercise or not, they were going to do it. And I think you need to have some flexibility in that. But I think with the friends thing, you want to pick a friend who understands that motivation is unreliable, and there's going to be some days where you just don't want to, and that's okay. But having a person that you can kind of be like, hey, today I'm going to do this because I know I want to, and then they'll be able to check in with you on that front. So I think it's, again, finding if that works for you or not.
So it sounds different because it's has a social component.
Yeah, I think the social component is really, really key. I tend to not like logs or apps as much because it feels very internal. And I think, like, while intrinsic motivation, so having the motivation inside of you to want to do something is important, sometimes having the like external motivation of a social support network can be really motivating. And it's more sustainable over time than relying on only intrinsic motivation to do a behavior. Anything else? All right. All right, so some additional resources. So I put, BJ Fogg has a whole book. So if you really loved his theory, which it's my favorite theory and I use it all the time with my clients, it's called Tiny Habits, The Small Changes That Change Everything. And it's a great book, and it really gives you a lot of these, he calls them like brain hacks, of really how you can rewire your brain to want to adopt positive habits, and with little tools like the anchor moments, behaviors, and celebration. So I think that's a really good tool. And he also has a whole website and a 5-day training. So if you are all in on tiny habits, that's a really great way to do it. I also about BJ Fogg from this podcast, which was Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert podcast with BJ Fogg. And he gives a ton of examples of habits that he's adopted through that. And they talk about a ton of different habits and behaviors that you can use and apply with tiny habits. So that's a really great one. I received my personal training and health coach certification through the American Council on Exercise, which is ACE. So that's where I got a lot of this from, was my textbook. But the website has a ton of information. I think if you just looked up ACE, American Council on Exercise, I can't remember what the website is exactly, maybe acefitness.org. They have a ton of articles on behavior change and adopting behaviors. And if you're interested in pursuing this as a career, like becoming a health coach, that's a really great tool as well. And then I also hope to be a resource for you. Feel free to send me emails. You can follow me on Instagram. I talk about behavior change a lot. And then I also obviously have private health coaching and personal training if you want to learn more about this. But and I also, the next slide is questions. So if you have any questions about your own situation or things that you're looking to do, I can do my best to try to help you. So with that, the presentation portion is complete. Thank you all for your involvement. So I'll open the floor to questions and I can try to answer them the best I can. And they also can just be comments too. They don't have to be questions. Just any takeaways you had or thoughts you have on this.
I mean, I just didn't realize what goes into changing a habit or behavior in general. So it was really interesting to see all the different key points and aspects that go into it. So it gives me a little bit more, hope for myself and studying.
Yeah. Do you think that there's other aspects of your life that you could apply this to?
I mean, in general, like, maybe just looking at personal development as a whole, rather than just like looking specifically into tiny habits, but everything about myself that I want to change to become a better version, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the only way I see it.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, starting small is really the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments, feelings? All right. Well, I will, Susan, go ahead.
One more comment.
Yeah.
To ask a question.
Yeah.
Do you have one strategy that gets you motivated the most?
That's a big question. No, that's a good question. I think for me, probably the most persuasive aspect, I'm going to give you two answers. One is having the social support. So having people in my life who I know will do this behavior with me or make sure I do it or motivate me to do it. So that's one aspect that is very motivating to me. The second is what BJ Fogg talks about with basically having the positive association with the behavior. I truly believe that you will not adopt a behavior long term if you don't feel like you feel positively about the behavior. So I guess my tool would just be to think about in that behavior or habit, what do you enjoy about it? What do you like about it? Maybe it's not what you've traditionally been thinking. So in the example that you gave earlier, maybe you can find an activity that feels really good for you, that you do look forward to and want to do most days. And maybe the ones that you've been thinking that you should do or have to do aren't ones that you would enjoy the most. So really finding the most positive and joyful version of that behavior for you to adopt. So I've spent a lot of my life doing exercise and movements that I didn't like because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And then I found, honestly, during COVID, what I enjoyed, and I get up every day looking forward to doing it. And I've never felt that way in my whole life. So it takes some navigating. But I think trying to have the most positive associations with that behavior and giving yourself the encouragement to do it.
Can I ask you what that was? That's so great.
My movement?
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, I'm an evangelist of this. So it's called Lit Yoga. We offer it at GW. And it's a version of yoga that's functional movement. So it looks at activities of daily life that we do. So thinking about balance, picking things up, hip flexion and extension, things that we do in everyday life. And it makes it into, it's like a functional yoga for, I don't know, activities of daily life, essentially. And I love it. I could talk about it for hours, but it feels so applicable to everything that you do in your life. And it's made me a better runner. It's made me honestly better at just moving in life. My movement patterns have gotten so much better. So I'm an evangelist for them, but it's amazing.
Okay, then maybe you have a suggestion, because I just tried the GW Lit Yoga
Yeah.
a couple days ago. I forget when it was on now. And I turned it off because it was so, I love the idea of it, and I like love taking GW yoga, staff yoga classes, but this was so hard. I couldn't do it. So what's your suggestion if that's what you want to do, but you can't follow along and it isn't something I can just do on my own?
Yes, I have many thoughts to this. So I guess my point number one, or my thought number one, is see if it's something that you actually like. Like, there may be other forms of movement that you enjoy, you just inherently enjoy more than that. Because I'm an anatomy nerd, I love it, but that might not be your thing. So I think first kind of evaluate whether that kind of movement is what you would enjoy, or if there's another form of movement that might be more fun for you. So thinking about walking, Zumba, HIIT, whatever that is for you. Second, so Lit Yoga has its own portal that is outside of GW, and it has hundreds of videos of Lit Yoga, from 5-minute beginner videos to hour-and-a-half long advanced videos. So that's what I choose to do every day. I take the GW classes because Meredith is my best friend, but I also do it on my own every day. And sometimes I do a 10-minute beginner stretch one. So I can put in the chat the link to that. And I think that's also a very good way to get into it. So you start to get those movement patterns into your brain wiring. So you're able to do them a lot faster and more efficiently over time.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to put in the chat the link to email, and then the link to the Lit Yoga, and then the Tree app. So if you want to give me 1 second, I will do all of those things. So let me grab and then if anyone else has questions while I'm doing this, I'll try to, not a great multitasker, but I'll do my best. Oh, I guess, so actually too is we put all of those classes up on our YouTube channel. So you can also, and this is really helpful for me, watch 10 minutes and then just do it again. And that really can help you. You can slow everything down. You can pause it if you need a second. And that can really help, I guess, back it off a little bit and choose your speed and intensity rather than have to do it at the same time as a class. And I recognize that takes out the social support component, which may be key to you, but you can kind of navigate that and see if it affects whether or not your motivation to do it changes. Okay, there's the Lit Yoga. Let's find. Yes. Here is the Forest app. That was what it was called, for the studying with friends. And then my email, I'll put that in the chat too. And then my Instagram is MyFitnessMal, in case you would like to follow me. Yeah, if you guys have anything else, I'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but I appreciate you all for coming, and I'm going to stop recording this.